Your cameras won't save you today.
They already recorded your downfall.
She called them again. You're kidding me. I muttered as red and blue light splashed across my driveway for the 4th time in 6 weeks. Claudia Brinkley stood at the edge of my lawn with her arms crossed, chin lifted like she'd caught a criminal instead of a homeowner rolling out trash bins. The board chair didn't even flinch when the deputy stepped out of the cruiser. Instead, she tilted her head with that smug, manufactured calm that always came before another fabricated accusation. "He's refusing compliance," she declared, pointing toward me as if she were directing a courtroom. I didn't wait for the deputy to speak. "Your claim won't stick," I said sharply. "And here's the part you keep forgetting. The camera post still timestamps everything you're lying about." Her expression faltered for half a breath, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her false authority. The enforcer in crimson stepped beside her, clutching a binder like it was armor, but she didn't look nearly as sure as usual. If you've ever felt that pulse of adrenaline when a bully pushes too far, stay with me and hit subscribe now. The clipboard queen flipped through her folder without finding anything useful. I could see her fingers shaking. She tried hiding it behind a deep breath, but her nerves betrayed her. The tyrant in heels adjusted her posture, heels digging into the sidewalk like she needed the ground's permission to stand firm. I wasn't intimidated. "My name's Elias Mercer," I said, voice steady. "And this house, this strip of grass, this driveway, this camera post, was my mother's last gift to me. I promised her I'd protect it, and I've kept that promise every day since." The officer of rules scoffed, but her eyes darted toward the small wooden post at the corner of my yard, my hidden pride. The camera post wasn't just a security measure, it was a symbol of the legacy I refused to let the HOA weaponize. My mother had installed the first version herself, teaching me how placement, angles, and shadows uncovered truth, even when people tried burying it. That memory tightened my chest. Her voice echoed in the back of my mind. "Pay attention, Eli. People reveal themselves when they think no one's watching." I swallowed the ache and focused on the present. "Your violation doesn't apply," I said, directing it at the board chair. "And you know that. You've been calling the cops on me for things that aren't even in the bylaws." She shifted ever so slightly. I caught it. So did the deputy. My driveway smelled faintly of cold asphalt. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The breeze brushed past my neck, carrying the bitter scent of the HOA president's perfume, something sharp, citrus-heavy, meant to project dominance. The officer beside her cleared his throat. "What exactly is the issue today?" he asked, though I noticed how his shoulders slumped, tired of this charade. The officer of rules spoke first. "He's refusing compliance with visual harmony standards." "That's not true," I cut in, "and my footage will show exactly what did happen." The deputy looked between us, already leaning in my direction. Claudia's jaw tightened. This wasn't the first time she'd weaponized her position, and she counted on residents freezing when she did. But I wasn't freezing. I was documenting. Pattern by pattern, call by call, violation by invented violation. And if you're watching this right now, tell me, where are you watching from? The enforcer in crimson whispered something to her, but the board chair ignored her and stepped closer, face taut. "You're destabilizing the community, Elias." "No," I said, calm and deliberate. "You are." Her eyes widened, just a flick, but enough. I'd found the weak seam. Every nerve in my body buzzed with adrenaline. This wasn't just another HOA stunt. This was the collision point, where months of harassment met the first spark of proof I needed. My mother's camera post recorded every second of this confrontation, and I could practically feel the footage building the case that would eventually dismantle everything the tyrant in heels had constructed around her authority. The deputy sighed. "I don't see a violation here." The officer of rules stiffened. Claudia exhaled sharply, heat rising under her polished composure. "We'll revisit this," she snapped. "We will," I replied, "just not how you expect." As she turned away, I felt it. The shift, the crack, the beginning of the unraveling. The deputy's cruiser rolled away, its fading sirens leaving behind a silence so sharp it felt surgical. Claudia Brinkley didn't follow him. She stayed rooted near the sidewalk, arms locked, eyes burning with the kind of fury only a person losing control could feel. The board chair wasn't used to hearing "no" especially not from law enforcement she'd manipulated for years. The enforcer in crimson hovered behind her, whispering frantic questions she pretended not to hear. The clipboard queen kept adjusting her binder, flipping through blank violations, as though willing a new infraction into existence. The tyrant in heels tried to regain composure. Chin lifted, but her stance betrayed the tremor in her confidence. I didn't move. I wanted her to see I wasn't shaken. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. "You can keep trying," I said, voice steady but low enough only she could hear. "But each call you make builds a timeline you can't erase." Her nostrils flared. "You're creating a hostile environment, Elias." "No," I replied. "Your pattern is?" Her glance flicked instinctively toward the camera post, the one she pretended didn't exist. The officer of rules joined her side, brandishing a pen, like a weapon, ready to scribble another imaginary offense. "You've violated Section 14.7 regarding exterior—" "Stop," I said. "You know that clause was removed 2 years ago. Your own board voted on it." The clipboard queen swallowed hard. She remembered that meeting. She remembered the amendment, and she knew she was caught. The board chair cut her a sharp look, warning her to stay quiet. Then she turned her gaze back to me, eyes narrowing. "You're manipulating the community with your recordings." I almost laughed. "The footage exposes the truth you keep running from." Her polished exterior cracked again, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. And I did. The enforcer in crimson tugged at her sleeve, urging her to retreat, but she shook her off. Pride wouldn't let her back down. But the street had changed. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains now stood on porches, observing the scene with cautious curiosity. No one stepped forward, not yet, but their silence wasn't obedience anymore. It was awakening. I walked toward my garage, not to escape, but to check the angle of the newest camera lens. The small device blinked green, recording everything with pristine audio. My mother's voice surfaced again in memory. "Truth isn't loud, Eli, it's patient." I breathed in, steadying myself. "Claudia," I said, turning back to her, "you filed 6 false complaints in 40 days, and 3 police dispatches were based on things you claimed happened when I wasn't even home." The tyrant in heels stiffened. The officer of rules looked like she wanted to disappear. "That's defamation," I continued, "and harassment, and misuse of emergency services." Her jaw locked. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said carefully. "I'm informing you." The clipboard queen flinched like the words themselves struck her. A rustle came from across the street. Mara Jensen, quiet, observant Mara, peeked from behind her door, eyes lingering on Claudia before she slipped inside again. She wasn't ready to speak up yet, but something in her expression told me she was shifting. Residents were noticing, and noticing was how change began. The board chair raised her chin higher, clinging to her unraveling authority. "We'll conduct a full evaluation at the next meeting. Your conduct is under review." "Great," I said. "I'll bring the footage." Her composure collapsed for half a second before she turned sharply, heels clicking like gunshots against the sidewalk. The enforcer in crimson followed, rattled. The clipboard queen trailed after, clutching her binder like a life vest. The officer of rules gave me a stare meant to intimidate, but her trembling fingers betrayed her. As they walked away, I stayed still, letting the tension wash through me slowly. My heart beat against my ribs, but not from fear, from certainty. Every false step they took was becoming evidence, crafted by their own arrogance. The street settled, porch lights flickered on, a car door shut somewhere in the distance. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds, but with a new undercurrent humming beneath them. Something had shifted tonight. I felt it in my bones. The camera post blinked again, a silent witness, recording the moment the HOA lost the illusion of control. This wasn't just another harassment incident. This was the beginning of the end for Claudia Brinkley, and she didn't know it yet. The next morning arrived heavy, the kind of overcast gray that made Willow Crest feel tighter, smaller, like the houses were leaning in to listen. I stepped outside with a mug warming my hands, letting the cool air settle across my shoulders. But I wasn't alone for long. A sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly down the street, too slowly to be passing through, too deliberately to be routine. And when it stopped in front of my driveway, I already knew who would step out. Deputy Aaron Salvez emerged, posture disciplined, but eyes carrying a quiet storm. He wasn't like the officers Claudia Brinkley manipulated with ease. He tried to be neutral, balanced, but I could see something different today. An internal tug-of-war tightening his jaw, a hesitation in the way he shut his door. The conflicted witness had arrived, though he didn't know his role yet. "Morning, Elias," he said, voice low. "Mind if we talk?" "Always," I answered, motioning toward the walkway. Before he spoke, his gaze flicked toward the camera post at the corner of my yard. His shoulders rose and fell with a breath that seemed heavier than the air around us. "Another complaint was filed late last night," he said. "Noise violation." I let the sentence hang. "I was asleep by 10. "I figured," he admitted, eyes shifting. His fingers tapped against the notebook he didn't open. "But protocol says I have to check." Across the street, a door creaked open. Mara Jensen peeked out again, lingered, then retreated just as quickly. Fear still held her hostage. Behind Aaron, the enforcer in crimson appeared farther down the sidewalk, standing beside Claudia Brinkley, as if summoned by the sound of authority. The board chair wore a forced composure, her expression cold enough to frost glass. The clipboard queen followed, binder hugged to her chest, while the tyrant in heels hovered on Claudia's other side, arms crossed tightly. The officer of rules trailed with her usual swagger, but her eyes betrayed anxiety, darting toward Aaron, then toward me, then toward the camera post, capturing everything. "I didn't call for backup," Aaron muttered, almost to himself. "They just showed up." Internal struggle flashed across his face, disbelief mixed with unease. He didn't want to be her weapon anymore, but he didn't know how to put the gun down without consequences. "Deputy," the board chair announced, striding forward, "I expect you to document his refusal, again." He stiffened, torn. "Ma'am, I haven't even determined." "You saw the violation," she snapped. "Don't pretend you didn't." His jaw flexed. It wasn't anger, frustration, maybe even embarrassment. He knew she was pushing him, pressuring him, and he hated it. "Elias," he said quietly, pulling me aside, "you wouldn't happen to have footage from last night, would you?" There it was, the crack in his loyalty. I nodded. "Everything from dusk to sunrise." He swallowed, not fear, relief, like he needed something, anything, to counter the weight she put on him. Behind us, the enforcer in crimson whispered urgently to the clipboard queen, who clutched her binder so tightly the edges bent. The tyrant in heels tapped her foot, impatience radiating off her. The officer of rules kept her gaze fixed on Aaron, like she was daring him to choose the wrong side. "Can I see it?" he asked, voice low. "Of course," I said. "But you should know. It doesn't show anything." He blinked, confusion mixing with dread. "Nothing?" "Nothing," I repeated, "because nothing happened." That truth pressed visibly against him. His shoulders slumped, his eyes closed for a second too long. He knew what it meant. He knew someone wasn't telling the truth, and it wasn't me. Behind us, Claudia Brinkley stepped forward, voice slicing through the air. "Deputy Salvez, you will record the violation, now." Aaron didn't turn. He didn't even look at her. His internal struggle was fully visible now. Chin trembling, hands tight, breath shallow. His conscience was wrestling with his duty, and the fight was turning his posture rigid with tension. "I need to verify the facts," he said quietly. The clipboard queen gasped. The tyrant in heels stiffened. The officer of rules muttered something under her breath. Claudia's face tightened, fury simmering beneath polished control. "You're undermining our community's safety." He straightened. "No, ma'am, I'm upholding it." A brave statement, but it came with a cost. I saw it in the flicker of fear behind his eyes, the silent acknowledgement that he'd just crossed an invisible line. As he followed me toward the house to review the footage, the board chair's stare burned across my back like a brand. The enforcer in crimson folded her arms defensively. The tyrant in heels whispered frantic threats to no one in particular. The officer of rules spat the final warning. "You're going to regret this." Maybe I would, but the footage was already waiting, and for the first time, I wasn't the only one who wanted to see it. Aaron followed me up the walkway, but every step looked like it weighed 50 pounds. His boots scuffed against the concrete, hesitant, conflicted, aware that each footfall pulled him further from Claudia Brinkley's grip. Behind us, the board chair stood planted in the center of the cul-de-sac, like she owned the asphalt. The enforcer in crimson flanked her, stiff and alert, while the clipboard queen clutched her binder so tightly the plastic creaked. The tyrant in heels had stopped pretending to be composed, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting like she expected the truth to ambush her. The officer of rules whispered angrily to Claudia, but even she sounded less confident. I unlocked my door and gestured for Aaron to step inside. The moment it closed behind us, he let out a breath he'd been holding far too long. "She doesn't let up, does she?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, "and she's counting on everyone being too intimidated to challenge her." He ran a hand across the back of his neck. "I'm starting to see that." For a second, his gaze drifted to my living room, family photos, my mother's framed blueprint, the quiet warmth of a space built with intention. The contrast between that calm and the chaos outside seemed to hit him hard. "Show me what you've got," he said. I pulled up the footage from the night before, the timestamp blinking clean and uninterrupted. I let it play. The street sat silent, the porch light flickering across pavement. No noise, no visitors, no cars, no lights inside my house. Just a peaceful neighborhood untouched by conflict, until Claudia created some. Aaron leaned closer, his jaw tightened with every passing second of nothingness. "This was the whole night?" he asked. "Every minute." He exhaled slowly. Shame curled the edges of his voice. "She filed a noise complaint at 11:52 p.m., said you were yelling threats." I turned to him. "Does this look like yelling?" His silence was my answer. I clicked to 11:51 p.m. He watched the still frame carefully, the calm street, a single porch light across the way, a stray leaf sliding across pavement in the wind. Not a sound, not a shadow, nothing. He whispered it like a confession. "She lied." Outside, the board chair paced with tightly coiled stature. Her voice, sharp and controlled, carried through the window even though I couldn't make out the words. She knew what he would find. The officer of rules kept pointing toward my house, agitation rising with every second we didn't come back out. The enforcer in crimson adjusted her jacket, trying to look confident while shifting her weight from foot to foot. The clipboard queen flipped her binder open again, flipping through empty sections like she believed proof might magically appear. "They're panicking," I said quietly. "They should be," Aaron muttered, surprising himself. He rubbed his forehead like he was fighting two versions of truth. One Claudia had fed him for years, and the one staring him in the face from my monitor. "Elias, this is serious. Filing false police reports isn't just unethical, it's criminal." "I know. But she's the HOA president. She has connections, people listen to her." "And she counted on that," I said. "That's why I built the camera post. I knew someday something wouldn't add up." He stared at the post through the window, small, wooden, unassuming, the symbol of everything Claudia never saw coming. "What are you planning to do with all this?" he asked. "Expose her," I answered plainly. "Not for revenge, just to make her stop." The words hovered between us, heavy, true. Then a sharp knock exploded against my front door. Aaron stiffened. The tyrant in heels called out, "Deputy Salvez, we expect a citation." Claudia's voice followed, clear as a blade. "If he isn't compliant, document it." He closed his eyes briefly. A silent war raged across his expression. His breathing grew shallow, his fingers curled into his palms. This was his breaking point, the line between being her enforcer and becoming an officer who valued truth. "I need to step outside," he said quietly. "Take the footage with you," I replied. "Let them see you've seen it." His eyes widened slightly, fear and determination mixing like gasoline and spark. He placed his hand on the flash drive I handed him. "This is going to blow things up," he whispered. "Good," I said. "Some explosions are overdue." As he opened the door, the HOA lineup stiffened, waiting, watching, and I knew, without question, this was the moment the balance of power finally shifted. Aaron stepped out onto my porch with the flash drive tucked in his palm, and the entire street seemed to hold its breath. Claudia Brinkley stood front and center, arms locked, chin angled upward like she was bracing for war. The board chair looked every bit the ruler she believed herself to be, until her eyes landed on the drive in Aaron's hand. A flicker of alarm flashed through her expression before she buried it beneath practiced indignation. The enforcer in crimson stiffened beside her, posture rigid. The clipboard queen clutched her binder as if it physically steadied her. The tyrant in heels shifted her weight anxiously, tapping her toe against the sidewalk. And the officer of rules stepped forward first, her voice heavy with false authority. "Deputy, we've been waiting. You'll want to proceed with the citation." Aaron didn't speak. Not yet. He looked at all of them, really looked, and something inside him visibly rearranged. The internal struggle that tore at him in Part 3 had sharpened into clarity. His posture straightened, his jaw set, and the silence stretched long enough to make Claudia's certainty falter. "There will be no citation," he finally said. The clipboard queen gasped. The tyrant in heels froze. The enforcer in crimson blinked rapidly. But it was Claudia Brinkley whose mask cracked first, a thin, unstable fissure slicing through her polished facade. "Excuse me?" she said, voice low and trembling with barely contained fury. Aaron held up the flash drive. "I saw the footage. There was no noise, no disturbance, no violation, nothing." The officer of rules sputtered. "That footage is irrelevant. It's time-stamped, uninterrupted, clear." Aaron's tone hardened. "And it disproves your complaint." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The street was still enough to hear leaves brushing across pavement. The board chair forced a smile. "Deputy, surely you understand. Video can be edited, misleading, taken out of context." Her words were confident, but her voice betrayed her. Thin, stretched, bordering on desperate. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to the eyewitnesses gathering on porches, neighbors who had begun noticing every crack in her story. Aaron shook his head slowly. "This wasn't edited. I know how manipulated footage looks. This isn't that." He didn't look at me, but the implication was clear. He trusted what he saw, and that mattered. I stepped off my porch and approached, taking my place beside him, not speaking, not escalating, simply existing as the counterweight Claudia could no longer ignore. "This isn't how things work," the board chair hissed. "Our community relies on enforcement, order, structure." "Order doesn't come from lies," Aaron replied. Shock rippled across her features. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not a resident, not a neighbor, and definitely not an officer. The clipboard queen muttered anxiously, flipping through pages that offered no salvation. The enforcer in crimson reached out as if to steady the group's collapsing authority. The tyrant in heels took a cautious step backward, heels scraping against concrete. "What exactly are you implying?" Claudia demanded. Aaron's eyes narrowed. "That filing false reports is a crime." Her breath caught. "Misusing emergency services is a crime," he continued. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "And falsifying allegations to harass a resident?" He paused deliberately. "That's definitely a crime." A pulse of panic flashed in her eyes, quick, involuntary, revealing everything. She quickly masked it with indignation. "You're crossing a line, deputy." "No," he said softly but firmly. "You crossed it the moment you tried weaponizing us against him." The street buzzed with whispers. Neighbors stared from behind curtains, from porches, from half-open doors. Their silence spoke volumes. I watched Claudia's reaction carefully. She wasn't used to opposition. She wasn't built for it. People like her thrived on submission, on fear, on unchallenged control. The moment she sensed that slipping, she grasped at whatever remained. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "I will not be spoken to like—" "You'll be spoken to like someone under investigation," Aaron interrupted. The enforcer in crimson gasped. The clipboard queen dropped her binder. Papers scattered across the concrete like a burst confession. The tyrant in heels covered her mouth. The officer of rules stepped forward, desperate. "Deputy, we can resolve this internally." "No," Aaron said. "This goes on record." Claudia's entire stance shifted, from dominant to defensive, from poised to brittle. Her voice trembled with a warning she no longer had the power to enforce. "You don't know who you're challenging." "I'm challenging lies," he said. "Nothing more." She backed up one step, then another. She didn't retreat because she wanted to. She retreated because, for the first time, she was afraid. Not of me, not of the footage, but of the truth she could no longer control. And she had no idea that what I would discover next would end her presidency forever. The moment Aaron declared the complaint would go on record, an invisible shockwave moved through Willow Crest. Neighbors vanished from windows. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Even the birds seemed to quiet, sensing the shift in power. Claudia Brinkley stood frozen in the middle of the cul-de-sac, her authority leaking out of her like air from a punctured tire. The board chair tried to recover her posture, but her hands betrayed her, shaking, tense, curling into fists she couldn't unclench. The enforcer in crimson stepped closer, whispering urgently into her ear, but even she looked rattled. The clipboard queen bent down to gather the papers she had dropped, fumbled them again, then hid her trembling behind a brittle smile. The tyrant in heels took a protective half-step behind Claudia, as if distance could shield her from consequences. And the officer of rules adjusted her badge-shaped lanyard with a shaky hand, trying desperately to maintain an illusion of authority that was slipping faster than she could grasp it. Aaron didn't move from my side. His silence was no longer conflicted. It was resolute, unshakable. And watching him stand there with the flash drive in hand made something settle inside my chest. Not victory, not yet, but commitment. "Elias," he said quietly, leaning toward me. "I need to check one more thing." I nodded. "What is it?" "That camera post. Does it pick up foot traffic beyond your property, sidewalk, street?" "It covers the entire front quadrant," I replied. "Motion activated, dual angle." "Why?" He exhaled, eyes flicking toward Claudia. "Because if she filed the complaint at 11:52, someone would have had to walk near your home to hear the noise. If no one was out there, then she wasn't reporting disturbance," I finished. "She was creating one." He nodded. Behind us, the board chair barked. "Deputy Salvez, we're done here. This is harassment of an HOA official." He murmured. "Let's find out." His boots hit the concrete with a decisive thud as he moved toward the camera post. Claudia stiffened, the enforcer in crimson blocking his path like a guard dog. "You do not have permission to—" Aaron brushed past her. "This is a public walkway. I don't need permission." The clipboard queen gasped. The tyrant in heels clutched her necklace. The officer of rules sputtered, "This is an overreach!" He ignored all of them. When he reached the post, he crouched, studying angles, checking range, verifying coverage with practiced scrutiny. "This would have caught anyone," he said. "It did," I replied. He straightened. "Let me see the motion log." I pulled it up on my phone. A clean, uninterrupted timeline appeared, no movement between 9:47 p.m. and 2:21 a.m. Not even a cat. He scanned the screen, his eyes hardening with every empty timestamp. "She filed a complaint from inside her home," he whispered. "She didn't hear anything. She made it up." It hit him harder than it hit me, because he'd been dispatched to my home, time and time again, based on nothing. He turned back toward the HOA lineup, jaw tight. Claudia Brinkley stared at him like she could will him into silence. The board chair's face was pale, almost gray, like the truth itself was draining her. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "I'm going to need a written statement from you." Her eyes widened. "For what?" "Last night's report, and the prior too." The enforcer in crimson stepped forward. "She doesn't have to justify herself to you." "Actually," he replied calmly, "she does. False reporting is a prosecutable offense, and this is now an open inquiry." The clipboard queen nearly dropped her binder again. The tyrant in heels stumbled backward. The officer of rules whispered Claudia's name sharply. A warning, a plea, a panic. But the board chair, she broke. "You can't do this," she snapped. "I built this community. I enforce the rules. I keep order." "No," I said softly from behind Aaron. "You keep control. There's a difference." Her glare sliced toward me with venom, but fear flickered behind it. "Elias," Aaron said, keeping his focus locked on her. "I'll need a copy of your entire footage archive from the past 60 days. Claudia jolted. 60? "You initiated all 6 police contacts," he replied. "I need to verify every report." The street erupted in whispers. The enforcer in crimson grabbed Claudia's arm. "We need to leave," she hissed. But the board chair didn't move. She stood trembling, defeated, cornered by the very truth she'd spent months trying to stamp out. And as I watched her facade fracture in real time, something settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was public. This was systemic. This was the moment her downfall began. And I knew what I had to do next. Aaron's request for 60 days of footage landed like an explosion, and the shockwave rippled clean through Willow Crest. Claudia Brinkley stood frozen, her facade cracking in too many places for her to repair at once. The board chair looked smaller than she had in months, shoulders tight, breath shallow, eyes darting as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. The enforcer in crimson hovered behind her with a pale, rigid expression, no longer the bold defender, but a shadow clinging to a collapsing throne. The clipboard queen couldn't stop fidgeting with her bent binder, opening and closing it in frantic cycles. The tyrant in heels shifted nervously, weight bouncing between her feet, heels digging into the concrete like she needed anchors. The officer of rules whispered, "We can fix this," but even she sounded unconvinced. Aaron turned to me. "Elias," he said, voice steady though his hands trembled slightly. "I'll need that archive as soon as possible. I'll log it officially. It needs to be protected." "I know," I said. "I'll prepare the extraction." But before I could step away, someone spoke, a voice I didn't expect. "Wait." We all turned. Mara Jensen stood on her porch, fingers gripping the railing like she'd used all her courage just to say one word. Her voice carried across the street, thin at first, tremoring with fear and hesitation. But she took another step forward, and another, until she was standing at the edge of her lawn, trembling but present. The conflicted witness was finally stepping out of the shadows. Aaron's brows lifted. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" "No," she whispered, eyes flicking toward Claudia Brinkley, whose expression turned cold and warning. The board chair's gaze sliced across the distance with enough venom to silence most residents. But Mara didn't retreat this time. She inhaled shakily and continued. "I need to say something." Claudia hissed, "Mara, don't." The enforcer in crimson took a step toward her. The clipboard queen mouthed something frantically. The tyrant in heels shook her head in fierce warning. The officer of rules crossed her arms, trying to intimidate through posture, but the fear that usually controlled Mara's voice didn't win today. She looked at me, then at Aaron, then back at Claudia, and the truth broke out. "She's been lying," Mara said louder now, "about everything." The enforcer in crimson gasped. The clipboard queen nearly dropped her binder again. The tyrant in heels muttered, "Oh no!" under her breath. Even the officer of rules stepped back in disbelief. Claudia took one sharp step forward. "Stop talking, now!" "No." Mara's voice cracked, but her stance didn't. "I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of watching her destroy people because she thinks she can't be touched." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I heard her that night, at 11:52. She wasn't outside. She wasn't checking anything. She was in her living room talking on speakerphone, laughing, saying, 'Let's see how many times he can take this before he snaps.'" Aaron's inhale was sharp. The board chair's composure shattered. "That's a lie." "It's not." Mara wiped her cheek. "And it's not the first time. She told me she'd break. Elias, if he didn't fall in line, she bragged about officers taking her side because she kept the neighborhood in order. She made fun of you, deputy, said you were too soft to question her." A tremor moved through Aaron's jaw. The enforcer in crimson grabbed Claudia's arm. "Tell me she's lying." But Claudia didn't respond, couldn't. Her silence screamed louder than any denial. Mara continued, voice shaking but firm. "She told me she filed 3 of the reports without even looking outside. She said it didn't matter because the HOA would back her no matter what." The clipboard queen dropped her binder again. This time it hit the pavement with a slap that echoed. The officer of rules stared at the board chair like she was seeing her for the first time. I stepped forward carefully. "Mara, thank you." She nodded, trembling. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Your mom, she helped me fix my front gate once. She told me, when someone does wrong, you don't let them keep doing it just because they scare you." I keep hearing her say that. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Aaron turned slowly to face Claudia Brinkley, his expression shifting from conflicted to resolute. "Ma'am, I'll need you to stay available for questioning. This is no longer a civil matter." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The enforcer in crimson stepped away from her. The clipboard queen backed up. The tyrant in heels stared at the ground. The officer of rules whispered, "Claudia, what have you done?" And as Mara walked toward me, still shaking but lighter somehow, I realized something important. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The truth had found its voice, and now nothing could silence it. Mara's confession hung in the air like a siren no one could turn off. Even after she stepped back toward her porch, the shock didn't fade. It deepened. The whole street seemed to rewire itself around the truth she had unleashed, and at the center of it stood Claudia Brinkley, looking as if her entire empire had been yanked out from under her. The board chair tried to straighten her spine, but her posture betrayed the collapse. Her eyes flicked wildly between neighbors, between Aaron, between me, as if searching for a reality where she still held control. The enforcer in crimson no longer looked like a defender. She looked like someone trapped in a sinking ship. The clipboard queen had pressed her binder against her stomach like she needed support to stay upright. The tyrant in heels paced short, sharp steps, muttering disbelief under her breath. The officer of rules folded her arms tightly, but her face had lost all certainty. This was the moment to build the strategy. The moment everything shifted toward public exposure. I stepped forward, letting the weight of silence settle around me. "Mara didn't just speak up," I said quietly. "She verified a pattern, and that pattern is already backed by the timestamps in my footage." Claudia snapped her gaze to me, fury and fear clashing in her eyes. "You manipulated her. You manipulated all of this." "No," I said. "You manipulated this community for months." Aaron nodded, stepping closer to the group. His voice was steady. "Ma'am, her statement combined with the footage creates a documented pattern of harassment and false reporting." The clipboard queen flinched, whispering, "Pattern?" "6 calls," Aaron continued, "all unfounded, likely all falsified." Claudia's breath came out hard, uneven. She turned to the enforcer in crimson. "Say something. Tell them—" But the enforcer in crimson stepped back. I didn't know she was fabricating things." The tyrant in heels choked out, "You said he was a threat." Claudia's eyes widened in outrage. "He is." "Based on what?" I asked, stepping closer. "Your imagination?" Gasps whispered through the street. Claudia's mask fissured deeper. Her voice cracked. "You think a few cameras will change anything? You think your little video post makes you untouchable?" "No," I replied. "But it makes the truth undeniable." Aaron cleared his throat. "Elias, let's talk next steps. We need to secure evidence and file reports properly." Now the strategy truly began. I turned toward him. "I'll create a secure backup of all footage from the past 60 days. I'll add metadata logs, compression analysis, and authentication stamps. That way, no one can claim it's altered." Aaron nodded, impressed despite the tension. "Good, that'll hold up under review." The clipboard queen whispered anxiously, "Review?" The officer of rules looked sick. "This is going to the sheriff's office?" Aaron's answer was simple. "Yes." Claudia's voice broke into a ragged scream. "You can't do this." But her panic only reinforced what everyone already saw. She wasn't protecting order. She was trying to hide what she'd done. I turned to the neighbors gathering along the street. "This isn't just about me. Anyone here who's been threatened, fined, intimidated, or silenced, your stories matter. They're part of the bigger pattern." The tyrant in heels stopped pacing. The enforcer in crimson swallowed hard. Even the clipboard queen looked away, guilt swimming across her features. Mara stepped forward again, voice trembling but strong. "I'll give a statement. I want this to end." Claudia's expression twisted. "You're betraying your community." "No," Mara said. "I'm protecting it." The statement landed like thunder. I walked toward my garage, every step aligned with the strategy forming in my mind. "I'll start the extraction now," I said to Aaron, "and I'll pull the security logs from the secondary angles too." He nodded. "I'll radio in and prep the report." Behind us, the board chair snapped. "Elias, we're not done!" She lunged one step forward, but the enforcer in crimson grabbed her arm. "Claudia, stop, please." The officer of rules murmured, "We need a lawyer." The clipboard queen whispered, "This is spiraling." The tyrant in heels clutched her bag like she was preparing to flee. And Claudia? She trembled with outrage and terror, her authority slipping through her fingers like water she could no longer hold. As I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back at her one last time. "This isn't the end," I said. "This is the beginning of the truth coming out." Her face contorted, but she didn't respond, because she knew it. We all did. The strategy was officially in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Inside my garage, my new primary battleground, the air smelled of cedar, cool metal, and the faint electrical hum of my workstation. This was where my mother taught me how to analyze a frame, how to track motion through shadows, how to isolate truth from distortion. And today, it was where I'd begin assembling the package that would dismantle Claudia Brinkley's empire. The board chair still lingered outside, her silhouette pacing like a caged storm. Every few seconds I heard her voice, sharp, frantic, arguing with the enforcer in crimson as if sheer rage could glue her authority back together. Aaron stepped inside, shutting the door gently behind him. "This is impressive," he said, scanning the monitors. "You weren't kidding about having system-level footage." "It's what I do," I said, moving to the console. "Digital evidence is my profession. Every frame, every timestamp, every pixel has a story." His eyes followed the playback on the first screen. Quiet street, empty sidewalk. The kind of peace Claudia never allowed anyone to enjoy for long. "She's losing it out there," he muttered. "The officer of rules tried convincing me the cameras were illegal." He shook his head. "She's unraveling." "She has to," I said. "She's built too many lies to hold them all at once." Outside, the clipboard queen's nervous voice pierced through the cracked window. "Claudia, please! We should leave! This is getting worse." The tyrant in heels snapped back. "We can't leave. That'll make us look guilty." They sounded exactly like what they were, panicked officials trapped in their own scheme. I inserted the first drive and began exporting raw footage. No edits, no jumps, full metadata intact. My cursor flew across the screen, separating files, building folders, layering authentication markers. Aaron watched with a mixture of fascination and dread, understanding how airtight this evidence was becoming. "What you're doing," he said softly. "This could destroy her." "No," I corrected. "She destroyed herself. I'm just assembling the truth." He nodded slowly. "You know this won't end quietly." It never does. As the progress bar filled, shouts erupted outside again. Through the window, I saw Claudia Brinkley yank her arm away from the enforcer in crimson. Her voice cut through the street like a blade. "He's staging this! He's manipulating everyone!" The clipboard queen tried calming her, hands trembling. "Claudia, please, this isn't sustainable." "Enough!" the board chair hissed. "We're the authority here." Her scream echoed with desperation, not dominance. The tyrant in heels rubbed her forehead, muttering, "This is out of control." The officer of rules paced in jagged steps, her panic growing. If investigators get involved, we're all implicated. That was the truth, and they all felt it. I turned to Aaron. Time to verify secondary angles. We approached the back wall where the secondary station captured reflections, motion overlays, and roadway glints. The feeds showed the same thing: silence, inactivity, proof that no disturbance existed. Only 6 false allegations orchestrated by the woman who now paced outside like a cornered wolf. Aaron leaned in, jaw tightening. "Every angle shows nothing, and she filed each report anyway." "That's the pattern," I said. "Consistent, documented, intentional." He exhaled. "This isn't harassment anymore. It's systematic abuse." The garage light flickered as if punctuating his words. Outside, I heard the tyrant in heels gasp, followed by frantic whispers. I moved toward the window quietly. Claudia stood rigid, staring directly at my home like she could burn it down with pure hatred. Her voice was low, trembling with fury. "He thinks that stupid camera post will save him. I'll bury him in paperwork. I'll bury him in violations. This isn't over." The enforcer in crimson whispered frantically, "Claudia, stop! They can hear you." "I don't care," she snapped. "I built this neighborhood. I enforce the rules." Aaron froze. We both heard it. A confession, not legally explicit, but implicating. Her voice had the weight of entitlement, the kind that always precedes downfall. "Elias," he said quietly, "I think this counts as additional evidence." "It does," I replied. "And the microphones picked it up." He blinked. "Your cameras recorded that?" "All of them," I said, "audio included." For the first time, Aaron didn't hide the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Relief and justice intertwined. I returned to the workstation. We need to package everything. Not messy, not dramatic, clean, professional, irrefutable. He straightened. "When it's ready, I'll submit it to the department. Internal review will take it from there." The progress bar hit 100%. The archive was complete. I unplugged the drive, feeling the weight of 60 days of harassment crystallize inside a small silver rectangle. The truth was no longer scattered. It was assembled, structured, ready. Outside, Claudia Brinkley's voice cracked through the night. "He won't win. I won't let him." But she was wrong, because the moment I closed the drive in my hand, I felt it. She'd already lost. I stepped out of the garage with the secured evidence drive in my hand, and the cold night air hit me like a warning. The street had quieted, but not in a peaceful way. More like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Claudia Brinkley stood near the sidewalk with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, rocking slightly as if she were trying to outrun her own unraveling. The board chair's authority had shrunk. Her posture, once razor-sharp, now looked jagged and desperate. The enforcer in crimson hovered nearby, whispering frantic fragments that Claudia ignored. The clipboard queen looked nauseous. The tyrant in heels paced in short, panicked circles. The officer of rules checked her phone repeatedly, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. Aaron joined me at the garage threshold. "You ready?" he asked quietly. "I've been ready for months," I said, closing the door behind us. He glanced toward the street. "This is the last phase before the formal confrontation. Once I take possession of the drive, the chain of custody starts, and she'll know it." "She already does," I murmured, because the moment Claudia spotted the drive in my hand, her eyes widened in raw, unfiltered panic. She stepped toward us. No, you can't give him that. Elias, listen to me." But her voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't a command anymore. It was fear, pretending to be control. The enforcer in crimson grabbed her arm. "Please, stop making it worse." The clipboard queen whispered, "They're going to audit everything." The tyrant in heels rubbed her temple, muttering, "We told you to stop after the second report." The officer of rules added, "We're all exposed now." Claudia jerked away from them. "I'm exposed because you didn't back me." I kept walking toward Aaron's cruiser, each step tightening the trap she'd set for herself. She followed, heels pounding against the pavement, steps uneven. "You don't understand what you're doing," she hissed. "If you submit that footage, the board collapses. Property values plummet. You'll ruin your own neighborhood." I turned. "I'm not ruining anything. Your false reports did that." "You're exaggerating," the board chair snapped, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "No," I said calmly. "I'm documenting." Aaron extended his hand for the drive, but before I passed it over, I looked Claudia directly in the eyes. "You could have stopped this any time. You didn't." Her breath hitched. "Because rules matter." "Rules matter," I agreed. "Abuse doesn't." The enforcer in crimson whispered harshly, "Claudia, please, don't say anything else." But it was too late. The tyrant in heels stepped back, palms up, as if distancing herself from a dangerous flame. The clipboard queen shook her head slowly, realization sinking in. The officer of rules looked down in silent panic. I handed the drive to Aaron. He took it with both hands, formal, controlled, official. And right then, a sound broke Claudia's restraint. A strangled, furious scream. "You think this is justice?" she shouted, voice splintering. "You think one piece of footage changes everything? I am this community." Her declaration reverberated through the quiet street like a confession carved in stone. The enforcer in crimson looked horrified. The clipboard queen took a step backward. The tyrant in heels covered her mouth in disbelief. The officer of rules whispered, "Oh my God." Aaron sighed. "Ma'am, you need to step back." But she kept coming, stumbling toward me with a mix of fury and pleading, her mask peeling away completely. "You're doing this because of her," she whispered, voice trembling. Your mother. You think I didn't know she broke rules too? You think she wasn't a problem? The words hit harder than I expected, but not how she intended. Instead of hurting me, they exposed her final motive: envy, resentment, and fear of losing control. I steadied my breathing. My mother helped this community. She didn't terrorize it. She challenged me, Claudia spat. She questioned every decision I made. And that was her right, I said, stepping closer. Just like this is mine. Aaron angled himself between us. Ma'am, this is your last warning. Claudia blinked rapidly, cracking under the weight of her own unraveling. The enforcer in crimson whispered, We need a lawyer. The clipboard queen murmured, This is going public. The tyrant in heels muttered, Everything's collapsing. The officer of rules pressed her hands to her face. But Claudia... She stared at the drive now, locked inside Aaron's evidence box like it was a death sentence. Because for her, it was. I stepped back toward my house, feeling the shift in the air, feeling the momentum turn irreversibly. The evidence was gone from my hands and into official custody. The strategy was no longer hypothetical. It was active. And the board chair? She was finally realizing she had no moves left. This wasn't the climax. It was the prelude. The storm before the public reckoning that waited in Part 11. The community hall buzzed long before I walked through the double doors. Voices swirled like static, tight, nervous, charged with the kind of anticipation that always comes before a reckoning. Folding chairs filled every inch of the room. Neighbors pressed shoulder to shoulder, some filming, others gripping HOA notices they'd been too scared to challenge until now. At the front of the hall sat Claudia Brinkley, stiff-backed and pale beneath the fluorescent lights. The board chair had dressed herself in authority. Crimson blazer, polished hair, chin raised, but it couldn't hide the tremor in her fingers. The enforcer in crimson stood behind her like a collapsing pillar, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The clipboard queen clutched a stack of papers so tightly they crinkled under her grip. The tyrant in heels tapped one trembling foot, her confidence leaking with every sharp click. The officer of rules looked drained, rubbing her forehead as if wishing she were anywhere else. Aaron stood near the front, evidence box in hand, radiating a calm certainty that sent visible ripples through the board. When he saw me enter, he gave a small nod. Not just acknowledgement, confirmation. It was time. I moved through the aisle as whispers rose around me like a tide. That's the guy. He's the one with the cameras. Is it true? Did she really? I heard the footage is damning. By the time I reached the front row, the room had quieted into a heavy, expectant hush. Claudia forced a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. We'll begin shortly, she said into the microphone, but the quiver in her voice echoed through the speakers. The tyrant in heels leaned forward and whispered something quick and desperate. The clipboard queen shook her head violently. The enforcer in crimson wiped her palms on her skirt. The officer of rules stared into space. This wasn't a meeting. This was an unraveling. A soft chime rang through the hall as the HOA secretary announced, This emergency session has been called to address concerns regarding the conduct of HOA President Claudia Brinkley. Gasps fluttered across the room. The board chair gripped her microphone. This is a misunderstanding. But Aaron stepped forward, calm and firm. Please allow me to present the evidence. Her complexion drained. He reached into the evidence box, pulling out the authenticated drive. A screen behind him came alive with the first video. A quiet street, time-stamped, verified. No disturbance, no violation. Nothing that justified the police call made minutes later by Claudia. Chairs creaked. People leaned in. Here, Aaron narrated, is the first of 6 calls made by the president over a 2-month period, all unfounded, all contradicted by the footage. Claudia slammed her hand on the table. This is taken out of context. No, he said softly. This is context. The feed shifted. Clip after clip played. Her false reports, the empty sidewalk, the quiet driveway, the untouched trash bins she'd claimed were a hazard, the non-existent noise complaint. And then, the final video. The audio of Claudia's furious rant outside my garage. I enforce the rules. I built this neighborhood. I'll bury him in violations. A sharp inhale rushed through the entire hall. The clipboard queen dropped her papers. The tyrant in heels whispered, Oh, God! The enforcer in crimson clasped her hands over her mouth. The officer of rules closed her eyes. But the biggest reaction came from the crowd. Anger, shock, recognition. This wasn't just my story. This was theirs too. Voices erupted. She fined me for a bush being too round. She threatened me over a garden flag. She said she'd evict my tenant. She told me my Christmas lights were aggressive. Claudia's eyes darted wildly around the room. These are lies, all of them. Mara stepped forward from the back row. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. They're not lies. You told me you'd break him if he didn't fall in line. The room fell silent. Claudia took a step back. The board chair's composure splintered into panic. Mara, stop. You don't know what you're doing. I do, Mara whispered. For the first time, I do. Aaron approached the board table. Based on the evidence, this meeting will conclude with my recommendation for immediate removal from office pending official charges. No! Claudia's scream cracked. You can't remove me. I am the board. The tyrant in heels whispered, defeated, Not anymore. The clipboard queen quietly slid her name tag aside. The enforcer in crimson stepped away from Claudia, like stepping back from a fire. The officer of rules folded her hands and whispered something that sounded like an apology. To the community, not to her president. I finally spoke. This ends tonight. Claudia shook her head violently. You ruined everything. No, I said, stepping closer. You did. The room erupted into applause, raw, cathartic, decades of fear dissolving into something stronger. Truth. More updates coming, I said into the mic, keeping it natural. And if you're with me in moments like this, stay close. We're just getting started. The crowd roared, and Claudia Brinkley collapsed in her chair, finally stripped of the power she'd abused for far too long. The applause still echoed in my chest when the meeting finally adjourned, but the aftershock, the real magnitude of what had just happened, hit only once the crowd spilled into the parking lot. The night air felt completely different now, lighter somehow, as if the whole neighborhood had taken its first full breath in years. People gathered in clusters, whispering, venting, even laughing in disbelief. And at the center of that unraveling storm sat Claudia Brinkley, slumped in her chair as the boardroom emptied around her. The board chair looked hollow, her shoulders sinking with every passing second. The enforcer in crimson stood several feet away, arms folded, refusing to meet her fallen leader's eyes. The clipboard queen packed her notes with trembling hands, flinching every time Claudia shifted. The tyrant in heels didn't even pretend to hide her tears. She dabbed her eyes quietly, mascara smudging like the last remnants of a collapsing rulebook. The officer of rules stared at the wall, her posture stiff with the weight of consequences she could no longer outrun. Aaron walked out beside me, the sealed evidence box tucked securely under his arm. Internal review starts tomorrow morning, he said. She'll be notified about the charges. She knows, I replied. She knew the second the footage hit that screen. Neighbors approached me one after another, firm handshakes, grateful words, emotional stories of fines, threats, warnings, and whispered intimidation they never felt safe admitting out loud. Tonight changed that. Tonight, silence had cracked wide open. Mara walked toward me slowly, hands clasped tightly in front of her chest. The streetlights cast a soft glow across her face, highlighting the relief in her eyes. You did it, she said softly. No, I corrected her. We did. She exhaled shakily, almost smiling. Your mom would have been proud. She always said the truth has a way of forcing itself into the light. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. Yeah, she did. For a moment, the world felt still. Even the air held its breath. The symbolic camera post across the street, my mother's legacy, stood quietly, its small LED blinking red like a heartbeat. Not a threat, not a weapon, just truth watching over a community that had been afraid for too long. Behind us, a loud scrape broke the silence. Claudia stood up abruptly, gripping the edge of the table like she needed help staying upright. The board chair's voice cut through the air, brittle and shaking. You won't get away with this. The enforcer in crimson shook her head. Claudia, stop. You betrayed me, Claudia spat, pointing at her former allies. All of you. The clipboard queen looked down, ashamed. The tyrant in heels whispered, "No, you betrayed us." The officer of rules murmured something to herself, some last-ditch mantra, but even she took a step away. Claudia turned her fury back toward me. "You manipulated them. That footage, your mother's stupid post, none of it proves anything." "It proves everything," I said, "and you know it." She stumbled forward, voice cracking. "I kept order. I protected this neighborhood." "You terrorized it," I said calmly, "and when people pushed back, you broke the rules you claimed to uphold." Her face twisted, not in denial, but in realization. The downfall had sunk in. The fight was over. The consequences were no longer avoidable. Aaron stepped between us. "Ma'am, please return home. You'll receive formal notice tomorrow." Her lip trembled. "After all I did, this is how you treat me?" "No," he said firmly. "This is how the law treats what you did." She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The enforcer in crimson guided her toward the exit. The clipboard queen followed at a distance. The tyrant in heels removed her name badge and dropped it on the table. The officer of rules slipped out quietly, avoiding every eye in the room. A quiet ripple of freedom spread across the parking lot, neighbors whispering, pointing at the building, shaking their heads in disbelief. Mara touched my arm gently. "You ended it." "No," I said again. "We started something better." A soft breeze drifted through Willow Crest, rustling the leaves, carrying away months of fear. I stood under the streetlight, letting the weight finally lift from my chest. "This community deserves safety, truth, accountability," I said to the small crowd forming around me. "And if you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from." A few people laughed lightly, surprised at the shift, but many nodded, understanding the purpose behind the moment. The camera post blinked again, quiet, steady, unwavering. My mother's legacy, my fight, our victory, and Willow Crest, finally free from the person who vowed she would never lose power.